mighty one shall Vero you.
Here's a paper on the calendar by one of my favorite calendar scholars. That's Etienne Nodet at the École Biblique in Jerusalem. The Book of Jubilees claims that the secret of the biblical calendar has been lost. It urges a reform and actually uses a solar year of 52 weeks or 364 days, reckoned from morning to morning. The year begins on a Wednesday, and the months are numbered. The reform did occur in some quarters, for it is witnessed by Qumran documents and rabbinic traditions. Besides various scraps of other reckonings, the Bible mainly displays 3 calendar systems, but they are never defined. The first one, which is the Canaanite Phoenician calendar, has named months and only appears by the time of Solomon's temple building. The second, which is almost overwhelming, uses unnamed, numbered months. The third is the well-known Babylonian lunisolar calendar with named months, present in some of the later books. It's generally assumed that the second one, with numbered months, was already the Babylonian one, and related to King Josiah's reform. We aim at showing that this view is quite doubtful, for this calendar actually is the very one that the Jubilees and subsequent Essene writings display and strive to restore. It's used in both narrative and legal texts, especially in the Pentateuch. We shall see that the calendar of the Reformers, or Covenanters, definitely had a starting point, March 23rd, 156 BC, a very unusual Wednesday with equinox and full moon. That's arguable. However, this solar year is shortened by 1.25 days than the natural cycle of around 365.35 days, but the Bible never hints at a permanent way to adjust it, and this was a big challenge for the Reformers. We shall see some reasons to think that this solar calendar, somewhat hidden, is only a literary device, which never worked for permanent use in biblical time. Header 1. The Calendar of Jubilees and the Bible. In the Babylonian lunisolar calendar, the days are reckoned from evening to evening, for the new moon can only be observed immediately after sunset. This feature can be found in some biblical books that have clear Eastern connections. In Esther 4:16, a fast of 3 days, nights, and days is ordered. According to Daniel 8:14, the sanctuary will be restored after 2,300 evenings and mornings. The same reckoning was used at the Jerusalem temple, since Josephus mentions a place where a priest used to signal, quote, by the sound of a trumpet, the afternoon of the approach, and on the following evening of the close of every 7th day. However, some Jewish documents, which are deemed to be sectarian, display a different, non-lunar calendar and claim that the secret of the Torah calendar has been lost and should be recovered. It can be shown, first, that this very calendar was in use in some quarters, and second, that it lies hidden in the Bible. Here's header 1, number 1, Rediscovering the Solar Year. The Book of Jubilees was known by some Greek fathers as the Little Genesis. The original version is lost, but it mainly survives by an Ethiopian translation titled The Book of the Division of Times. And the book rewrites the stories of Genesis, with some omissions and changes, and various details from Deuteronomy are added. That is Exodus, I think. Exodus and Deuteronomy. The chronological frame is a kind of solar year of 364 days, as found in Jubilees 6:33 through 38, which I'm sure you've all read. and the history of the world is computed in jubilees of 50 years. The days are reckoned from the morning, and the lunar rhythm of the months is ignored, but nothing is said of the adjustments necessary to match the actual natural year. R. Charles dated the work after the Maccabean crisis in the 2nd century BCE. The Damascus document, a Hebrew text first discovered sometime before 1900 in the Geniza of a Karaite synagogue of Cairo, cites as an authority this very book of the divisions of times. It states that Israel had corrupted the Sabbaths and festivals and had forgotten the secrets. That's in CD 13. A new community called the Covenant has been created or sponsored by a teacher of righteousness. Again in CD 1. According to CD 3 to 4, it includes priests, Levites, sons of Zadok, and candidates. Obviously, this covenant followed the book referred to. The Qumran caves have delivered fragments of these two texts, as well as many others in which the same calendar is used. Some calendrical documents from Cave 4 describe the service cycle of the priestly courses and give the dates of the major festivals. The introduction of one text refers to the creation week, that's 4Q320, which I quote, Vakat, to its being seen from the east, to shine in the middle of the heaven at the foundation of creation from evening until morning on the 4th day of the week, Wednesday. Indeed, in Genesis 1:16 we read, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. This means, first, that it's a day of full moon, and second, that any astral calendar starts on the 4th day of creation, and not on the 1st. Editorial note here. This is a hard concept to get over to people that want to know about this calendar. That is, unlike, as is our custom, the new year does not start on the first day of a week. That is to say, our new year starts on, say, January 1st, well, whatever day that is. But the Jubilee's new year always starts on the 4th day, which we know is Wednesday. And that's very clear in the documentation, in the sacred texts. In other words, the days are reckoned from the morning, which cannot match the lunar calendar. Thus, one of the main points of that introduction is to stress that the lunar calendar that focuses on the new moon is somewhat unbiblical, in spite of several mentions of the new moon, sometimes parallel to Shabbat as full moon. As for the solar year of 364 days, it's divided into 4 quarters that start on a Wednesday in connection with the solstices and equinoxes. Here's another note. From my investigation, nowhere in the canonical calendrical texts like Genesis does it ever say new moon. Who put the moon in that? Was it the Masoretes? It only says new, and if I remember right, that word is Kodesh. It expects you to know that that's not the moon, but that is the month that they're talking about, because at the time that literature was written, I suspect they were using a solar calendar. They used a solar calendar before 175 BC, before the death of Onias III. That's when the moon calendar came in. Before that, even the tabernacle, Solomon's temple, they used a solar calendar and a 364-day solar calendar. And my friends, that's not hard to ferret out if you're reading the primary documents. The lunisolar year has 2 components. Its main part of 12 months of about 29.5 days has about 354 days, hence a discrepancy of around 10 days with the solar year, which could be approximately corrected by adding 1 month every 3 years. But since early times, the Babylonian astronomers knew that the natural year amounts to 365.25 days, and observed that 235 lunar months are equal to 19 natural years, with an error lesser than 2 hours. Since 19 lunar years make 228 lunar months, an efficient correction in the long range is to have inserted 7 additional months over every 19 lunar years. As for the Jubilee calendar, the year lacks 1.25 days to match the natural year, so that the discrepancy with nature grows quickly. Or does it? In my way of calculating, it does not. But of course, I don't get any attention on this. But if you use my way, it all works out year by year by year. Maybe he'll get to that. Probably won't. I've never seen anyone explain that before regarding where that 1.25 days left over goes. If you want to know and what makes this calendar a perfect calendar, then go to one of my other presentations about the calendar. Most of them I explain it. Or write me. Go to Yahad, YAHAD.me, and ask me where that extra day and a quarter goes, and I'll write right back to you and tell you. In order to keep the rhythm of the weeks and the beginning of the year on a Wednesday, it's necessary to add a week from time to time. An easy calculation shows that the shortest possible period to fix the discrepancy is 28 years, during which 5 weeks must have been added. Thus, if the first day of the first month falls on a Wednesday of a full moon, the same conjunction will occur 28 years later, but never before. Now, a proof that this system has worked is provided by the rabbinic blessing of the sun, which invokes creation and has to be performed every 28 years at sunrise, facing east. It falls on one Wednesday morning that is supposed to be the vernal equinox, or Shemuel's year. Such a custom can't be surprising, since a significant part of the rabbinic tradition has come from the Essenes. However, the year of 365.25 days, which was enforced in Rome by Caesar in 45 BC, doesn't match exactly the tropical year. After being used for centuries, it was discovered that it is too long by about 0.75 days per century, which was the root of the Gregorian reform in 1582, with a tropical year of 365.2468 days. But since the correction was intended to refer to Constantine's time and not Caesar's, only 10 days were dropped instead of 14. Of course, the Jewish blessing has ignored that reform and sticks to the Babylonian astral year of 365.25 days. In 2009, it occurs on Wednesday, April the 8th, more than 16 days after the true astral equinox. The remedy for this is to fix it annually. Not wait 28 years or until your crops are coming up in the middle of winter. Since the calculated equinox moves ahead of the tropical one by about 3 days every 400 years, a simple calculation allows us to go back to the starting point of the custom, and it was on Wednesday, March 23rd, 156 BC, when the astronomical instant of the equinox happened to be very close to the instant of the full moon. We may conjecture that the Babylonian astronomers were aware of this very rare phenomenon, which occurs in average less than twice per millennium. Such was the beginning of the first cycle of the blessing. The useful conclusion here is that the reformers, that is, the Essenes or the like, or Covenanters, can hardly have surfaced earlier. In spite of this interesting testimony, we don't know whether the solar calendar was adjusted this way by all the sectarian groups. Besides the 28-year device, another possibility was at hand, namely, to add 1 or 2 days every year. Now you're on the track. That is, to have one longer week with blank days, or as some texts say, non-days. Such a method did exist. The old Egyptian calendar had 12 months and 30 days and 5 epagomenal days. Can't remember what that means. They were added at the end without paying attention to week. This is just common sense, this correction. And I personally have no doubt that the Zadokites used this and didn't wait 28 years or 400 years to correct it. Listen, that's stupid. Nip it in the bud. Fix it. Use the non-day method. The only problem with the non-day method, even though it's the most simple solution to the problem for that day 0.25 also, it's just logical. It makes sense. Okay, I told you this is one of my favorite scholars to read calendar information from. But I'm a little baffled right now that I never read in him before that he thinks that the Covenanters, a.k.a. Essenes, a.k.a. Nazarenes, a.k.a. Zadokites, only fix their calendar every 28 years. That is a whole month of days and a little more. All right, let me go on. Some sectarian texts suggest a correction of this kind. The corruption of the Sabbaths and festivals, cited above, points to a calendar problem in both cases and not to the details of the rites. According to CD 10, 14 through 17, any work should be interpreted on Friday before sunset, which is not a dissident view, but in CD 3, 12 through 16, it said that the Sabbath belongs to the hidden things, which suggests that it had to follow a calendrical decision. An obscure passage of 1 Enoch can be understood this way. In 74:12, we read, quote, "The sun and the stars bring in all the year exactly, so that they do not advance or delay their position by a single day. This shows that there was a corrective system which is supposed to have worked." Of course there was. Another hint is given in Jubilees 50. The Jubilee falls on the 50th year after the 7th sabbatical year, and then a new cycle begins. So the rhythm of the 7th years is broken by the insertion of a blank Jubilee year. This may suggest a similar feature for the rhythm of the seventh day. In fact, the documents using this calendar split into two categories. The first one includes texts presenting it as a whole. We find that in Jubilees, Hannock 4Q209 and 4Q MMT, the Miksat HaMasa Torah. They only consider the first year, that is, the creation year. The second is a collection of texts giving details on the priestly courses with references to the lunar phases, but their meaning is not clear, for they have been poorly preserved. They may reflect either a permanent order or dispositions for a specific period. Recent studies show that they most probably were a perpetual system, but only in an ideological way. The linear months were adjusted to exactly 3 solar years, so that the Sabbaths were preserved, but the observation of the phases of the moon shifted by half a day every 3 years, or 1 month every 177 years. With the natural tropical dating, we obtain a shift of some 125 days every 100 years. Such a difference is by no means impossible, for we know that some ancient calendars got quite unconnected with nature. The Julian reform was enforced in Rome on the 1st of January 45 BC, but in order to fix it properly, 96 days had to be inserted into the previous year. In Egypt, the official solar year had 365.25 days since many centuries, and in 238 BC, when Ptolemy III tried to introduce the tropical year brought in by Alexander, his decree explained the reform by saying that the winter feasts were falling in summer. And conversely, I'm telling you, those priests were not stupid. This was fixed annually, and it really didn't need to be fixed at all. Just a little bit of explanation needs to be done. To sum up, the lost solar calendar that the sectarian documents wanted to restore was obviously quite hidden, for the calendrical documents that depend on it are either cumbersome or unconnected with nature. Some attempts were actually made, but there is no reason to assume that there was only one school. The root of the problem is simple. On the fourth day of creation week, a full moon occurred, and the duration of light and darkness was supposed to be equal, equinoxical. Hence, a dream to fix a calendar that would renew this conjunction every year, but after a short period, either the weeks or the months or the seasons get necessarily distorted. Next time we'll go on to part 2 here, a biblical calendar both hidden and virtual. Just very quickly, how do you fix this? With a non-day. If you start every year afresh, connected with the equinox or equilux, pick one. Then go to the next Sunday, which is day 1, then go to the next Wednesday, which is day 4. If you use the equinox every year, you are never going to have to put in any days. Not in 7 years, not in 28 years, not in 177 years. Because, and here's the secret of it, people just can't seem to get this, that from equinox to equinox, or equilux to equilux, is exactly 365.24 days. Where have we heard that before? It's the same amount as the tropical year. So if we put a non-day in the calendar at the end of every year, you're always going to be able to start out again on the next Wednesday. Now, my friend Ari Mordecai went out 200 years to test this. And he said in 200 years, it was right on. He's one of these people that he's got to test what he's going to believe. I brought this up to him, and I brought it up to a lot of people. But people just can't believe this until, like Mordecai, he works it out with a computer program to 200 years. And since that worked out perfectly, he figured he didn't have to go anymore. If it works out that way in 200 years, unless something major switches, then it's going to work out in 2,000 years. Okay, we'll be back maybe later tonight or tomorrow. I hope Yahweh's blessing you, and I hope you're considering. If we're going to come together on anything, let it be the calendar, but let it be the right calendar, not something manipulated and secret put together in some university someplace. Thank you, my friends. You have been listening to Jackson Snyder Presents on Hebrew Nation Radio.
Syria or of her